What's up guys, welcome back to the Tech video, and this is a bit of a different video that I'm doing today because I'm not reviewing a product, I'm actually looking for some help. You see, I want to get my dad a new tablet. Now, he's been rocking the iPad Air since it first came out back in, I don't know what it was, 2014, 2015, and actually it's broken now, so he's not rocking it anymore. And that, that was the original iPad Air, the one that came with the advert where it has that pencil and like it's hiding behind a pencil and then it shows the iPad Air and you can see how thin it is. Yeah, that one, right? So he originally got it for work, I think, and then it kind of just got downgraded over time into like a media consumption device. Now, obviously that's dead now, but he really liked it. He was using it everywhere. He would take it all around the house, kitchen, dining room, living room. So looking to replace that, I'm trying to think to myself, well, considering that's what he needs it for, I'm not going to go for something like an iPad Pro or the Tab S10 Plus from Samsung because that wouldn't be financially responsible. So what could you get that's good, good for watching, has a good screen, good battery life, that you can get for a £200, $250 budget kind of area? And there are actually a few good options. So I'm going to go through what I found and let me know what you think. So the first one that I think would be a good option is the Honor Pad 9. Now that comes as a 12.1 inch screen, so that's a really big, that's a good size screen. That's bigger than the iPad Air. It's bigger than this is the Tab S6, which has all my notes on it. So yeah, 12.1 inch screen, that's a really good size. It's got 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, but considering it doesn't really download anything on it, storage is not a huge issue. Now, this is not the newest tablet from the list. It came out in December 2023, so it's about a year and a half old at this point, which isn't ideal, but it actually isn't an Honor Pad 10 to replace it. So the Honor Pad 9 came out in December 2023, nothing came out in December 2024 from Honor, from the same class. So it's still technically the most up-to-date one. So slightly awkwardly, the Honor Pad 10 came out in late May after I shot this video. It's still only available in a few countries, not available in the UK or the US, and it's actually, over €300, which is still outside of our budget. It's running quite a good processor. It's running the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1, which is a 4mm processor, which is quite good. Pairing that with 8 gigabytes of RAM, it's actually quite good for most things. It is running a slightly older version of Android 13, but that can be upgraded to Android 14. The good thing about the size is that it actually has quite a large battery life, so about 8,300 milliamps, which honestly is good for 11 hours of use. Now, I know no one uses tablets for video taking or photos, but it can be good to have, especially if you want to scan documents. Actually, you know what? He's not ever going to do that. Yeah, I don't think he's ever used the camera on his iPad. But just in case any of you guys are interested, it's got a 30 megapixel rear camera, which is okay, and a 8 megapixel front-facing camera. And actually, this is probably the best camera system that we'll see from the rest of the list. The good thing about it is you can get it just under £200. It's about £196. As a direct US conversion is $250 something. That's because I don't think this specific tablet is available in the US. The thing is though, obviously this would need a case. Now, stressing the case is because my dad had the, that folio kind of case, the flip one that kind of does some origami and turns into a stand that magnetically attaches to the iPad. Yeah, it's not cumbersome to use, it's lightweight, so you can leave it on the tablet and you can easily switch it into the stand mode. And that is essential because, he props it wherever he goes. So it would need to have a kind of case stand, but that brings me on nicely to the next tablet, which has the stand included. And that's why I really, really like the Lenovo Plus. Now, this is an 11.5 inch tablet, so it's a little bit smaller, and it's actually got a worse resolution screen. So the Honor 9 was running a 256 by 1600 display, so that's got a pixel density of 249 pixels per inch, whereas the Lenovo Plus is running a 203 pixels per inch, so a little bit lower resolution and smaller display. But actually, no, it's not but yet, because there's still more worse features. It's running a 228 gigabyte storage compared to the 256 of the Honor, and still running 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's running the MediaTek Helio G99, which is a 6mm processor. And if you compare it to the Snapdragon 6 Gen 1, even though this is a newer tablet, this came out in June 2024, it actually has a worse processor than the Honor 9. But now we can say but. It's running Android 14 out of the box, so it's good, no upgrade needed. And it's got 2 huge JBL speakers on the sides, making it literally perfect for media consumption. And this is why I really liked it, it's got a built-in stand. Now, don't underestimate that, because if you're using your tablet around the house, do you really need a case on it? Removing that bulkiness and having that built-in stand gives it so much more usability and kind of ease of use. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I don't know, I just find that really convenient to have built in. And it's got quite an interesting, quirky design because of it. It's just about whether you want to sacrifice the screen size, screen resolution, processor, cameras. What did I talk about the cameras? It's only running a 8 megapixel front and back. Battery wise though, it is doing better. So it's got an 8600 milliamp hour battery, probably because even though it's got a smaller screen, it's got a bit more of that extra thickness because of the stand. It can fit a larger battery, and I think Lenovo say it goes up to 15 hours of playtime. So, you know, this is option number 2. I really like the tablet. I think I like it because of its kind of uniqueness. But I need to kind of get that out of my head as a tech reviewer and start thinking about what's the best tablet to get rather than what's the most interesting. Oh, and finally, price. This is slightly more expensive, £218, which is around $273 US. Okay, so what can we get from Samsung? Because, you know, I'm a Samsung boy. That sounds really weird to say. I use Samsung products. So what can we get from there? Now, Samsung aren't the best budget-wise. They do make budget devices, but I always find that you get way better value for money from a budget aspect of things when you go for basically the Chinese companies. You know, Honor, Lenovo Chinese, I'm pretty sure. Huawei, although we don't use much Huawei anymore because of sanctions. Oppo. Anyway, so let's go back to Samsung. So there's 2 tablets that I have had a look at. There's the A9, which is around £177, so the cheapest of the bunch, but kind of explains why it's so cheap is because it's got a really small screen. 8.7 inches, so the smallest screens that we've seen. It came out, it's the oldest one, it came out in October 2023. Android 13, so the same as the Honor, but can also be upgraded to Android 14. I mean, not only is the screen small, it's also got the lowest resolution. It's got 179 pixels per inch density, so it is running the same processor as the Lenovo. So whatever comparison I made in terms of processing power between the Honor and the Lenovo, we can assume the same for the A9, because it's also running 8GB of RAM, low storage, 128GB, 8 megapixel rear camera, 2 megapixel front camera, so you know, we're just getting worse and worse with the cameras. Again, not a problem really for my dad, but in case anyone else is wondering, not a great option. So definitely has the smallest battery because it's a much smaller tablet, 5100 milliamps, but still offers apparently 12 hours of battery life. So cheapest of the bunch, definitely like a smaller one-handed use. I would say if you're kind of going out around wanting to keep that in your bag, using it as like a reading tablet, that's a really good size. But I think for media consumption, for videos, for someone who's not really going to be carrying it around and mainly just using it within their house, I think something big is needed. So you have the A9 Plus from Samsung. Now that makes it so far the most expensive because that's £249, or surprisingly in the US you can actually get it for around $200. So I'm not sure how that works, but I guess it's just, you know, trade and tariffs, but these might not be the most up-to-date prices given the current political situations. Now these came out at the same time, so same thing, running Android 13, but now we're stepping up the screen size to 11 inches. So still smaller than the Honor and still smaller than the Lenovo, but it's running the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 6mm processor. So different to the A9, the standard A9 and the Lenovo, which are both running the MediaTek processor. So now we want to compare actually the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 6mm to Honor's Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 4mm, and as you might expect, Honor still win in this regard. Okay, so the last one I want to look at, because these are all Android versions, and that's fine, but that's not to say that you can't get budget iPads. You know, my dad was using an iPad before, he can continue using it. I don't think he's too fussed with the operating system because his phone is a Samsung, so the whole Android Apple thing doesn't really exist, and the idea of having an ecosystem doesn't apply. So obviously all of these are things that you might want to consider, but specifically for my dad, it doesn't apply. So surprisingly, the cheapest iPad you can get isn't the smallest. The iPad mini is the smallest one, and that's still a few $100. The cheapest iPad you can get, the cheapest new iPad you can get, I should say, is just called the iPad 2025, I guess. That's an 11-inch iPad. It's got a good resolution screen actually. It's got a 264 ppi display, which is the highest resolution of them all, just above the Honor. Obviously it's the newest one, it came out in March 2025. It's running the new iPad OS system, so 18.3, and obviously processor wise, it's running the Apple's A16. This is a 4mm processor, but I mean it absolutely smokes the rest out of the water. Even though this is quite an old processor, it's still way better than any of these Android ones. Now, it's still only got 6GB of RAM, so it's actually got not much RAM, and 128GB of storage, and unfortunately Apple don't let you upgrade the storage ever in any of their devices. So once you max out, you max out, and that kind of limits the lifespan of that device, which is why you have to kind of upgrade to higher storages. And I think they do it on purpose, but the problem is that when you start upgrading to higher storages, you get the 256 model, the prices just kind of exponentially skyrocket, and then it becomes absolutely not worth it. So even though the lowest model, 128 gigabytes of storage, 6 gigabytes of RAM, still over £300, nearly £100 over our budget. And you're just not getting much because you're not really using the processor. The processor is the most impressive thing about this tablet, and you're not going to make use of it on YouTube, Amazon Prime, Netflix. They don't require much processing power. So actually you're better off, and it's more financially responsible, not in this case, to pay for a processor that you're not going to use. Now, to try and get iPads that are closer to my budget, you then have to start looking at refurbished ones. So I looked at the iPad 2022, closer to around £200. It's only 64 gigabytes of storage. It's got a much smaller screen, 10.9 inches. Trying to find an Apple product in that price budget wasn't feasible. You can tell me if it's worth it. If you think paying for £300, 300 something pounds for the standard iPad 2025 is a good option, let me know. But those are the kind of my list. I mean, it's in the list because it's an option. I would consider it. So these are all of the tablets I would consider. So let me know. I'd be really interested to see what you guys think. And with that, I'll see you on the next Tech I Take video. Maybe the next one will be a review of this tablet. So